Hey songwriters, welcome back to another edition of At Home Songwriting. In this video, I'm going to be talking about rewriting in songwriting. You know, when I used to hear people say rewriting, I used to think that they were scrapping the whole song and redoing it. But over time, I've realized that rewriting is really another name or another way of saying editing. It's really about refining your song from a first draft into a final draft. And there's a lot that goes into that. So today I wanted to focus on some things that you should be looking at or what you could be looking at as you sit down to rewrite your songs. Putting a little space between ourselves and our creative outlet can give us a fresh set of eyes and ears. So what I wanted to do today is just give you some helpful tips and tricks to help you think about rewriting in your own songwriting. So let's jump in. So like I had mentioned, rewriting is refining and editing before your final release or before your song is quote unquote finished. I know some people will say that songs are never finished, but at some point you have to kind of call it and say, is it good enough to put out there? So if something is working, you don't need to rewrite it. So that's something to remember as well. Just because you had it as a first idea, if it's a good idea, it's a good idea. The key here is to train yourself to spot when things are not working or if they bug you. Also, really be careful to not over rewrite, because sometimes you can rewrite your song to death. So make sure you give your song some space if you can get it. Let it go, come back, or don't come back. Sometimes it's just better to write a new song instead of trying to revive a dead one. So some common things to look for in your rewriting. One of the things is sometimes we're doing too much telling and not enough showing. And what that means is you're using a lot of emotional language and you're not using a whole lot of imagery. So look for places where you could maybe add some more imagery to your verses. Another very common thing that happens is our verses start to say the exact same thing as one another, and the story doesn't go anywhere. So that means your first verse might sound exactly like the second verse, and all of the verses say the same thing in a different way. Look for that as you review what you've written. Another thing to watch for when you're rewriting is how much contrast do you have between your song sections. If you don't have very much contrast, that's a good sign that your listener may get bored and they may switch off listening to your song. You want to give them contrast and you want to change it up so they're not getting bored and they're constantly getting something new and fresh. So contrast between sections is such a huge tool for doing this. Another thing that some songwriters do is they overuse perfect rhymes. And this is especially common with newer writers where you try to rhyme everything exactly, and perfect rhymes can actually ruin what you're trying to say because the rhyme is actually stronger than the rest of the lyric. And I think you've all heard that in some songs where the rhyme just stands out in a really weird way and it almost makes it too predictable. So watch out for perfect rhymes. They're your friend and enemy. You need to know when to use them and when not to. Also, watch out for language that's not conversational or relatable. Your listeners want to listen to a song and not realize that they're listening to a song. They want to have that oral conversation with you as the songwriter and possibly the artist. So watch for that non-conversational language and try to say things the way that you would normally say them. I think sometimes as songwriters, we try to get overly flowery and we try to get too poetic with our writing when sort of erring on the side of just saying it like it is really can be a powerful thing too. Other things to look for as you're rewriting and reviewing your songs. One important one is melodies that lack motif. And what do we mean by motif? Motif is a repeated pattern that's recognizable so your listener can sort of latch onto it and remember what your melody is doing. If your melody wanders all over the place and doesn't have a lot of repetition and there's not a pattern to it, that can really lose your listener as well. So watch for those melodies that lack that motif. Also, The melodies between your verses should be very close to the same, if not the exact same melody in the verses. And some people will argue this because they say, well, I don't have to have my second verse match exactly the first verse. But the reality is your listener likes the familiarity, and it also tells them what song section they're in if the melody matches. If your melody is different, your listener may not know exactly what part of the song that they're in, and it could confuse them, and confusion leads to tuning out. So be sure you watch for your melodies and try to match your verse melodies as closely as possible. Also, a huge mistake that I make still to this day sometimes, and especially when I first started writing songs, is I rely too much on the chorus to save the rest of the song. You know, because people say, well, the chorus is the most important part of the song. Yes, but your song needs all of the other parts to support the chorus. So don't rely too much on a really hooky chorus to save the song, because your listener will not really care if the chorus is really great if the rest of the song is lackluster. Also, be sure to watch for point of view and tense issues. Make sure that you're very careful on who your listener is getting heard from and who's being talked to and what time frame it's in. A lot of times you have to look at your verbs to find the tense, to make sure that your tense is matching. One of the things that I do as a mistake, and a lot of other songwriters do as a mistake, is we sort of mix match tenses. So something might be happening future, it might be happening past, but it's all kind of in the same section. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you are in the tense that you want to be, and everything matches from a tense perspective, and then also point of view. Another thing that songwriters will do, and something to watch out for, is, are you trying to say too much? Really great songs focus on very specific situations, points in time, emotions, ideas. So sometimes we try to include way too much in our songs, so less is more when it comes to your songwriting. Another thing to watch out for as you're rewriting is a lack of concise rhyme schemes. I've seen a lot of songs come to review meetings where the songs are good, but there's no rhyme scheme. So the listener, or me, I start to be like off a little bit, because I'm looking for that familiarity, I'm looking for that repetition, I'm looking for patterns. I think one of the things to remember as a songwriter is you're really trying to teach your listener how to sing your song. And if you don't have repeating rhyme schemes, if you don't have repeating melodies, if you don't have repeating ideas, they get lost because there's too much to process. So make sure that you're writing with a rhyme scheme, because it can help you keep that structure. So let's talk about questions that you can ask about your song as you are reviewing and rewriting. So first off, does your first verse set up a who, when, and where, or at least two of those three? Most songs, if you can establish a who, when, or where, or two of the three within your first verse, that gives you a really solid starting point that your listener is going to know what's going on. So watch for that. We've talked about this before. Is your point of view consistent? Also, is the tense consistent, and does it drive the story? And do your song sections have contrasting rhyme schemes? You know, we talked about having rhyme scheme, but you should vary it from section to section, because that's a really strong way to create lyrical contrast within your song. And as we've talked about before, contrast is what keeps your listener interested in continuing to listen to your song. Other things to ask as you review your songs: do you use different types of rhyme? You should experiment with different types of rhyme. Don't always use perfect rhyme. Also, are the lyrics conversational and not forced? And does your melody build energy as the song progresses? And what we mean by building energy is many times your melody will start low in your verse, and it sort of gains in pitch and even in rhythmic momentum as the song goes on to really build energy. So watch for that. Also, does your chorus state the why, and is it the emotional center and really what the core idea of your song is about? So is your chorus that anchor, that core rock of emotion and why your song exists? And we talked about this before too. Do your verses have the same melody? That can be very important. Other things, do your choruses have the same melody and lyrics? Some people change their chorus lyrics, and I personally think if you do that, it's not a chorus anymore, because you want your chorus to be the part of the song that everybody remembers and everybody can sing along to it. If you keep changing the lyrics in your chorus, nobody's going to be able to sing along to it. So do your choruses have the exact same melody and exact same lyrics? Another thing is, can you sing or hum the melodies without any music? If you can't sing or hum your melody without music or chords, sorry to tell you, but it's not that strong. So really try to write melodies that you can remember and people can hum after they've heard the song. Another key thing to do here, and I see a lot of songwriters don't do this, make sure you read your lyrics out loud. Do they make sense? Can you feel rhythmic contrast between your sections? Does the story make sense? Are you leaving out parts that don't make sense? Make sure that when you read it out loud, you read it and pay attention to what information you're getting. Also, if you're writing commercial music or songs that you would like to get published or have other artists sing, or maybe just, more popular mainstream music, is the title obvious? In most hit songs, the title is extremely obvious. So if your title is not obvious, that may not be the right title for your song. Also, does your music support prosody? Does the music support what the lyrics are saying? And does the song keep your interest? If you can't be interested in your song, there's zero chance of your listener staying interested in your song. And some of the last things to ask as you're rewriting and refining, can you replace any of your verbs with more interesting verbs? Take out a thesaurus and see if you can find some other words that maybe tell your story a little bit better. But don't go too overboard on this. You want to keep it conversational and relatable. Also, do you have any filler lines? I know some of you, actually a lot of you, probably have songs where you could have written a better line, but you didn't. I would call those a filler line. And here's the thing, if you're writing and you get stuck on one line, do not stop there. Just put in a filler line and move on to the next section. You can always come back and replace the filler line. So look for filler lines and see if you can replace them. Another thing to listen for and watch for is, does your song sound cliche? And what cliche means is, does it sound like something that's been done before? It's super predictable. It's borderline cheesy. Look for kind of that feeling when you listen to it, because cliches, sometimes they work, and some people are good at using cliches in a new way, but a lot of times it's just you're writing somebody else's song and you're not doing a good job of it. Also, is there a pleasant sense of familiarity in your chord progression and your harmonic rhythm? And what does this mean? So to me, this means, does your song sound like it has a consistent chord progression, a consistent harmonic sound that just matches the rest of the song and is pleasant to the listener? Watch out for that. And again, look for if your song has a mix of showing and telling lyrics. You should have a mix of emotional lyrics and imagery lyrics. So make sure you have that mix and you're not leaning too far one way or the other. And finally, have you played your song for anyone else? Pay attention to how they respond, both verbally and non-verbally. Because a lot of times people will say things with their body that they're not saying with their mouth. And that can really give you a sense of where is the energy working and where is it not. And also, I will tell you, if you're playing your song for someone and you have an area where you cringe, that's probably a good sign that you should work on that part of the song because something isn't strong for you. So I know we covered a lot of things here, and there's a ton of things that you can do while you're rewriting and refining your songs. Hopefully, this gives you some things to look at as you review your own songwriting. And we'll have more videos about where to get songs critiqued, how to, use feedback to change your songs, and how to make your songs the best that they can be from first draft. So if you haven't subscribed, I'd appreciate a subscribe. And check out the links in this description because we do have live workshops. And again, thanks so much for joining me. If there's any topics or any ideas that you have, please put it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I'm Chad Schenk with At Home Songwriting. Let's head to the next video.